Every prison is built on one promise: no one gets out who isn't supposed to. Walls, watchtowers, cameras, locks. The whole system is designed for one thing: control. But every once in a while, someone finds a way to break that promise. Not in a movie, not in a video game. In real life, in the United States. Tonight, we're diving into real prison escapes that stunned the public, embarrassed officials, and forced huge changes in how prisons work. These are not how-to guides. We're not here to praise or glamorize crime. We're here to tell the true stories of how the system failed, and what happened next when the nation woke up and realized someone got out. From a fortress in the middle of San Francisco Bay to a prison break that used nothing but patience, planning, and a homemade tool, to a modern escape that had millions glued to their screens. These are prison escapes that shock the nation. If you're into true crime, real-life mysteries, and the moments when reality feels stranger than fiction, hit that like button, subscribe, and turn on notifications. Because this is going to be a wild 15-minute journey through the cracks in a system that was supposed to be unbreakable. Alcatraz, the most famous prison in American history, located on an island in the middle of San Francisco Bay, surrounded by cold, fast-moving water. It was designed for the worst of the worst, the inmates other prisons couldn't handle. For years, the official message was simple: no one escapes from Alcatraz. But in 1962, that belief was shaken to its core. Inmates Frank Morris and brothers John and Clarence Anglin were serving time in the main cell block of Alcatraz. On paper, they were locked down. In reality, they were quietly working on one of the most famous prison break attempts in history. They started with something small: the ventilation grills at the back of their cells. Night after night, using homemade tools, including a piece of metal from a vacuum cleaner and sharpened spoons, they chipped away at the concrete around those vents. They hid the noise behind the sound of music, prison work, and everyday activity. They hid the damage with painted cardboard covers. It wasn't a dramatic, one-night explosion. It was slow, methodical, and patient. Behind their cells, a hidden utility corridor ran the length of the block. Once the holes were big enough, they crawled through into that forbidden space, a place guards didn't regularly inspect in detail. Up there, they built a secret workshop on a top-level area above the cell block. Using raincoats, they spent weeks constructing a makeshift raft and life vests. They used stolen hair from the prison barbershop and soap to create fake heads, which they put on their pillows to fool guards during nightly checks. On the night of June 11, 1962, everything came together. They squeezed through the holes behind their cells, climbed the plumbing to the top of the cell block, made their way onto the roof, slid down a pipe, and reached the shoreline. There, they launched their raincoat raft into the dark, freezing waters of the bay, and vanished. The next morning, guards discovered the fake heads. The alarm went out. A massive search began: boats, helicopters, the works. The question that still hangs over this story: did they make it? Or did the bay claim them? The official investigation leaned toward the idea that they likely drowned. The ocean is brutal, the currents are strong, and the distance isn't easy. But over the years, rumors, alleged sightings, and even family claims trickled out. Some say the Anglin brothers survived and lived quietly under new identities. Others call it wishful thinking. What we do know is this: the escape attempt itself was real. It exposed vulnerabilities even in America's most secure prison at the time. And it shook the image of Alcatraz as truly escape-proof. The public was fascinated and concerned. If inmates could engineer something like this in a place like Alcatraz, what about everywhere else? Not every shocking escape involves an island fortress or handmade rafts. Sometimes, it's much simpler, and somehow even more chilling. In a southern state prison in the United States, decades after Alcatraz, a group of inmates discovered that one of the least glamorous parts of the prison was also one of the weakest points: the drainage and sewer system. The prison had a complex network of old, aging pipes under the yard. Most people never thought about them. But inmates, day after day, seeing the same walls and the same patterns, noticed things others miss. They realized that certain access covers weren't as secure as they should have been. Over time, while on work details and yard time, they studied guard rotations, camera positions, and weak zones with limited visibility. Once they spotted a pattern, they started carefully planning. They found a way into a section of underground tunnel and began widening a narrow connection point, slowly, quietly, piece by piece. The conditions down there were awful: tight spaces, bad air, the constant risk of getting stuck. But again, this wasn't a Hollywood-style breakout with explosions and car chases. It was the result of long-term observation, patience, and timing. One night, when they believed the guard rotation and count system had a predictable opening, they slipped through the access point, made their way into the underground system, and began working toward an exit point outside the walls. When staff realized inmates were missing, everybody scrambled. Searchlights, local law enforcement, roadblocks, the whole response you'd expect. The escape triggered massive coverage and public outrage. How could a secure facility miss something as basic as sewer access? Within days, prison officials were under pressure. If they got out through the pipes, what else have you overlooked? The manhunt that followed was intense. Eventually, most, or all, of the escapees were tracked down and returned to custody. But the damage to public confidence was done. It wasn't just about those particular inmates. It was the terrifying idea that somewhere beneath those fences and towers, the ground itself might be hollow. The aftermath forced the state to overhaul physical inspections of old infrastructure, locking mechanisms on access hatches, regular map checks of underground spaces, and better monitoring of inmate work patterns. The lesson was clear: prison security isn't just about walls you can see. It's about every single pathway in and out, even in places most people will never look. Not all shocking escapes involve digging, climbing, or crawling through tunnels. Some of the most incredible ones happen almost entirely on paper. In one American case that stunned investigators, an inmate didn't scale walls or cut bars. Instead, he exploited something far less dramatic: the system's own paperwork and procedures. Here's how it played out. The prison had a routine: inmates with similar names, overlapping records, and transfers between facilities were managed by a mix of manual processing and computer records. That meant a ton of forms, sign-offs, and data entry, and any time a system relies heavily on human input, there's room for error. The inmate noticed that another prisoner with a somewhat similar name and background was scheduled for a legitimate transfer and eventual release. It was a completely authorized legal process. For the other man, through careful observation and quiet manipulation of information, including memorizing ID numbers, understanding how callouts worked, and knowing when to speak up and when to stay quiet, he slid himself into that administrative stream. He answered to the other man's name during roll calls at key moments. He showed up where the other person was expected to be. At one point, a critical verification step, the moment where someone was supposed to double-check identity markers, was rushed or skipped. Maybe it was a busy day. Maybe someone was overconfident in the system. The result? He walked out of the facility as if he were the other inmate, with official approval. No walls climbed. No sirens blaring behind him. He just followed the line of people moving through a process that was supposed to be controlled. By the time the mistake was caught, he was already gone. This case shook the public in a very different way from a dramatic wall climb or tunnel escape. It wasn't about brute force. It was about how fragile our trust is in systems that rely on humans checking boxes and stamping documents. The response was swift: more strict identity checks, better photo verification, biometric systems like fingerprints or digital scans, and stricter separation of inmates with similar identifying information. The escape also raised a bigger question. In an age of data, Are we actually safer? Or just trusting more that the computer is always right? It was a wake-up call that even the illusion of control can be dangerous, if no one's truly, carefully watching. In older prison escapes, you might hear about them after the fact in a newspaper. Today, the entire world can find out within minutes. In the age of 24/7 news, smartphones, and social media, a prison escape doesn't just shock a region, it can capture the attention of an entire nation in real time. Here's the difference. Decades ago, if someone escaped, local law enforcement and maybe neighboring states got involved. The public knew there was a problem, but information moved slowly. Now, when an inmate escapes from a U.S. facility, especially a serious offender, everyone gets an alert on their phone. There's live footage from helicopters, dashcam video from patrol cars, and constant updates on social media platforms. In one especially high-profile American escape case in the 21st century, 2 inmates managed to get out of a secure facility with help from someone on the inside. The story exploded, breaking news banners, live press conferences, maps of search areas on national TV, people posting sightings and rumors online. For days, the escape dominated headlines. Schools changed routines. Neighborhoods stayed on edge. Police reinforced patrols. The public wasn't just watching from a distance, they were part of the story, sending in tips, footage, and observations. Ultimately, the escapees were tracked down and captured. But the larger impact was about more than just them. It showed how quickly information and misinformation could spread. It highlighted how much pressure law enforcement faces under public scrutiny. And it reminded everyone that even in a high-tech era, an escape is still possible. The prison system responded by reviewing staff screening and training, communication protocols, physical and electronic security integration, how to handle inside help vulnerabilities. What makes modern escapes so shocking isn't just that someone got out. It's that the entire country can watch it unfold live. Refreshing their screens, commenting, speculating, and sometimes even interfering with the flow of accurate information. The stakes are higher, the fear spreads faster, and the sense of vulnerability hits harder. Because in a connected world, every escape feels closer to home. So how does any of this happen? If prisons are built to keep people in, how do these stories exist at all? When you look closely at almost every major escape that shook the nation, you start to see patterns, not in glorifying the people who did it, but in understanding how systems can fail. Here are some of the most common themes. Underestimating creativity. People under strict control notice things most of us never would. They see routines, weaknesses, habits. A vent nobody checks. A door that never quite closes all the way. Long-term exposure to the same environment makes small flaws stand out. Old infrastructure. Some prisons are decades, even generations, old. Pipes. Vents. Foundations. When those aren't regularly inspected and updated, someone looking for a way out might find one. Overconfidence in routine. When a system runs the same way every day, people start to trust it too much. That's when head counts are rushed, camera blind spots are taken for granted, and "we've always done it this way" becomes the most dangerous sentence in the building. Overloaded staff. Many facilities deal with staffing shortages and long shifts. Tired people make mistakes. They might skip a step, miss a sign, or let something slide that they usually wouldn't. Inside help. In some high-profile escapes, the biggest vulnerability wasn't a wall or a gate, it was a person. When staff are manipulated, pressured, or persuaded into helping, the system's strongest protections can be quietly bypassed. None of this means prisons are powerless. It does mean they're run by humans, and humans, no matter how well trained, are not perfect. The good news? Every escape that shocks the nation also forces change. Better training, stronger infrastructure, updated technology, more careful oversight. In a very real way, each failure becomes a case study, a warning sign, for every other facility in the country. The history of shocking prison escapes is also the history of how prisons got harder to escape from. For example, after Alcatraz-style escapes, facilities put more effort into inspecting vents, utility corridors, and maintenance shafts. Access areas once ignored became high-priority security zones. After tunnel and sewer escapes, states invested in engineering surveys, sealed off old pipes, and added grates, bars, and alarmed covers, not just at the walls, but buried deep underground. After paperwork and ID mistakes, systems moved toward digital records, multiple ID checks, and biometric verification so you can't just answer to another person's name and walk out. After cases involving inside help, staff vetting became more intense. There was more training on manipulation tactics and warning signs, and stronger rules about relationships and boundaries. Today, many U.S. prisons use multiple perimeter fences, motion sensors, infrared cameras, automatic lockdown protocols, drone coverage in some areas, detailed tracking of inmate movement. Do those systems make escapes impossible? No system can honestly claim that. But they do make it much harder, and they mean that every time something goes wrong, there's more data to understand why. At the same time, serious questions remain. How do we balance safety and human rights inside prisons? How do we keep staff supported enough not to make dangerous mistakes? How do we use technology without ignoring the human judgment that has to guide it? Because here's the thing, security isn't just about machines and walls. It's also about policies, culture, and constant vigilance. Every shocking escape is a reminder, you can't just build a strong wall and walk away. You have to constantly test it, question it, and improve it. Let's be honest, there's a reason you clicked on this video. Stories about prison escapes hit a nerve. On one level, there's the simple suspense. Will they make it? Will they get caught? How on earth did they even try this? On another level, these stories tap into something deeper, our complicated feelings about justice, punishment, and control. Prisons are supposed to be absolute. They represent the state saying, you are here, and you are not leaving until your sentence is over. When someone escapes, even temporarily, it challenges that idea. It makes us ask, how strong is our system, really? Who's responsible when it fails? The individual, the institution, or both? Are we as secure as we think we are? For some people, escape stories are about fear, the idea of dangerous individuals suddenly on the loose. For others, they raise moral questions. What does it mean to be locked away for years? What kind of pressure does that put on the human mind? But here's what matters most for this channel. We can be fascinated by these stories, without celebrating the crimes that put people behind bars, or endorsing the escapes themselves. There are real victims behind many of these cases. There are communities that live through fear and disruption. There are officers and staff who risk their lives to track people down. Our goal is to understand, not to glorify. To learn from what happened, not to repeat it. We've seen an escape-proof island prison that wasn't as perfect as it claimed, a dirty, underground route that nobody thought to secure, a paperwork trick that let someone walk out the front door, and the way modern escapes can turn into nationwide manhunts in an instant. Each one of these escapes did more than just move a few people from point A to point B. They changed policies. They changed technology. They changed how America thinks about security, control, and the line between order and chaos. Now I want to hear from you. Do you think a truly escape-proof prison is even possible? Or will there always be some flaw, some crack, some human error waiting to be exposed? Drop your thoughts in the comments. If you've made it this far, type "the walls have eyes" so I know you're one of the hardcore viewers who stay to the end. If you found this deep dive interesting, hit that like button. It tells the algorithm this is worth sharing. Subscribe if you love long-form true crime breakdowns that dig into the systems behind the stories, not just the headlines. And if you want more, our next video is going to look at the other side of the bars, what really happens during a full-scale prison lockdown, from the inside out. You will not want to miss that. Thanks for watching Prison Escapes that shocked the nation. Stay safe, stay curious. And remember, the strongest systems are the ones we're always willing to question.